Okay. Did you get a little thing that said this video is recording?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
Good. See, now 6 participants. Nolan, admit.
Who's our 6th?
Nolan.
Oh, hey, Nolan.
Good.
Hello, Nolan.
I was trying to set up a fun background, but my computer isn't letting me.
I know how that is.
Uh-huh.
It works on my work laptop, but not on my personal laptop, apparently.
Well, I'm supposed to get a small green screen that attaches to a chair tomorrow, so next thing,
I'm getting mine too.
I'm going to be on a beach for the next service.
I'm going to see when mine's coming. Amazon, Amazon.
Just so you know, Terry, this will all be on the recording.
Yeah, I'll be quiet. I'll stop singing.
Okay, so welcome all. I'm sure we'll have some more people join us, and if Terry, if you see participants changes, let me know and I'll let them in.
Okay.
Okay. So today we're looking at the next chapter of Women of the Bible, and it's the women supporting Moses. I think what I hope you will see by the end of this Sunday school is that the book of Exodus, Moses isn't the hero. It's actually all these women in his life that do most of the work. So there's Shifra and Pua, Yocheved, Bithia, Miriam, Tharbis, and Zipporah. There's a lot of other women. They play really minor roles and aren't named in the story. But these are the main ones. And you'll note, if you are a fan of Cecil B. DeMille, most of these pictures are from the film The Ten Commandments. So just to give Mr. DeMille credit. And feel free to ask questions anytime. I think I have you all off mute. So Nolan has muted himself, I guess.
I was coughing.
Okay. So to begin, this is the point in scripture that we really kind of move from myth into legend. And as I've said before, myth is does not mean fake. It just means expanded. So myths are ways to tell the big picture. And then legends are true stories that are oftentimes exaggerated a bit. So a legend is presumed to have some basis in historical fact and tends to mention real people or events that we can trace. Historical fact morphs into a legend when the truth has been exaggerated to the point that real people or events have taken on a romanticized, larger-than-life quality. In contrast, a myth is a type of symbolic storytelling that has never based on fact, that we can trace. Throughout time, myths have sought to explain difficult concepts, the origin of the universe, for example, with the help of common story devices such as personification and allegories. So most of Genesis, our creation stories, fall under that concept or that definition of myth. Exodus, and we'll see in the book of Judges, and begins to come into the realm of legend. And this is like, Abraham Lincoln. There are legendary stories of Abraham Lincoln. That's a little closer to our time, but even like Alexander the Great and the Emperor Nero fall into the realm of legend. So I've got this nice little chart here to kind of break it apart. legend is evidence that evidence occurred or events occurred or people existed, yes, but evidence may be incorrect or insubstantial. When and where did it happen? Typically in more recent historical past, usually from a specific culture. That definitely falls into play here. And what are they about? Often about historical, heroic deeds, overcoming obstacles, but may also be about evil doing. So in myth, what are they about? Traditional narratives that explains natural phenomena. So the stories of creation. Remember, we have two creation stories in the book of Genesis, and often involves the gods of ancient cultures. And I hope they're working for you. Got some nice little gifts here. This is from the History of the World Part 1, Mel Brooks. Here I bring you 15 commandments, and he drops one, and oops. I kind of wish it would have actually happened that way. So to begin with, I've got this kind of, to fit things into context, a review video real quick. Last week, we're coming off of Jacob and his wives and their sons. Joseph is sent into Egypt by his brothers because they want to get rid of him. And then as the famine hits, the whole family is brought to Egypt, and they actually become rather wealthy. So Joseph, being the second in command, sets it up that the Egyptians are actually enslaved to Pharaoh as payment for feeding them. And when Joseph's family comes, they are given all these sheep to tend for Pharaoh's sheep, and they are moved into Goshen, so they become the shepherds for Pharaoh, and become rather wealthy. And as long as there is a Pharaoh who knows Joseph, or who knew Joseph, they're doing pretty good. But then Exodus begins, and then came a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, or respect Joseph. So then this great family that has grown and grown and grown and grown in Egypt is enslaved by the Egyptians. And that is where this story then begins. Whoops, too far. Back. Play.
The book of Exodus is the second book of the Torah. Its title means going out or departure and derives from the Greek translation of the Bible, the Septuagint. Most scholars trace the materials in this book to three literary sources: the Yahwist, the Elohist, and the priestly source. The stories of the book of Exodus belong to the New Kingdom period of Egyptian history, after the
I can't hear the video anymore.
between Israel and God at Mount Sinai in chapter 19, verse 1, through chapter 40, verse 38. At the beginning of Exodus, Israel's sons have grown to become the people of Israel. The text says that the Israelites remained slaves by the Egyptians for over 400 years. Historical records also indicate that the ancient store cities of Pithom and Ramses were built by foreign slaves, possibly Hebrews. These ancient texts also refer to a group of people living in the region at the time known as Habiru. The Habiru were considered very low class by the Egyptians. Habiru may or may not refer to the Hebrews. Now Pharaoh saw that the Hebrews, whom he perceived as a threat to his rule, were increasing in population, so he ordered that all Israelite baby boys be killed. But the text says the Hebrew midwives feared God and did not kill the baby boys. When Pharaoh questioned them about the lack of infanticide, they lied and told him that Hebrew women were always popping out kids faster than they could keep track of, and so God blessed the midwives. But Pharaoh eventually sent his soldiers from house to house to kill all of the Hebrew baby boys, and the babies were thrown into the Nile River as an offering to the river god. Now Moses was born during this time of distress, and his parents hid him for 3 months. Eventually, his mother took him down to the Nile River, but instead of throwing him in, she put him in a waterproof basket and hid him among the reeds, and his sister Miriam watched over him from a distance. Later, Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in the river nearby and found the basket with the baby inside. She wanted to keep the baby, and when she saw Miriam, she sent her to go find someone to nurse him for her. Miriam got her mom, and Moses was able to stay with his family until he was weaned before Pharaoh's daughter came and took him to live with her. She named the baby Moses, and he grew up in the Egyptian palace. Moses is an Egyptian name. It comes from Mose, meaning is born, and is very similar to the name Ramses, which means Ra is born. It's ironic that the man who would later become the leader of the Israelites would have an Egyptian name. When Moses was 40 years old, he decided he wanted to identify with his own people and do what he could to free them. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating a fellow Israelite, so he killed the Egyptian and hid the body. The next day, he saw two Israelites fighting with each other, and he tried to stop them. They retorted, "Are you going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian?" And when Pharaoh found out what Moses did, he tried to kill him. And Moses fled Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian. In Midian, Moses married Zipporah, the daughter of a Midianite priest named Jethro. They had 2 sons, and Moses lived as a shepherd in Midian for 40 years. One day, while Moses was leading his flock near Mount Horeb, he saw a bush that was on fire but did not burn up. God spoke to him from the flames, telling him that he had heard the oppression of his people in Egypt, and so now he was going to send Moses to lead them to a land flowing with milk and honey. But when Moses heard this, he made all kinds of excuses about why God shouldn't send him back to Egypt. Moses said, "I'm nobody," to which God said, "I will be with you." Moses said, "I don't even know your name," to which God said, "Tell them, I am who I am. The one who is has sent you. This is my name forever." And Moses said, "What if they don't believe me?" And God said, "I will perform signs through you." And Moses is like, "But what if they don't listen to me?" And God is like, "Then I will perform more signs through you." And Moses says, "I'm not a good speaker," to which God replies, "Who gave man his mouth? Is it not I?" But Moses insists, saying, "Please send someone else." At this point, God gets mad and is like, "Okay, fine, I'll send your brother Aaron with you to help you out with this public speaking thing that you're so scared of." So after his encounter with God, Moses tells his father-in-law Jethro about what God had said to him, and he then packs up his wife and kids and heads towards Egypt. Here, the text strangely says, "And the Lord met him and was about to kill him," followed by a scene where Zipporah performs a circumcision on Moses' son and places the foreskin on Moses' feet, saying, "You are a bridegroom of blood to me." And the text says that the Lord decides to let him alone. Huh? So we're not really sure what in the world is going on in this passage. We don't know why Zipporah was able to save her family member with a flint knife, and with the overuse of pronouns, we don't even know whose life was in danger, Moses or his sons. It's kind of weird. But anyway, later Moses met up with Aaron and they went together to the elders of the Israelites in Egypt and performed miraculous signs for them. Moses and Aaron went before Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, 'Let my people go.'" But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I won't let Israel go." And Pharaoh told everyone to get back to work. Pharaoh also took away the straw the people used to make bricks, and had the Israelites beaten if they didn't make enough bricks during the day, accusing them of being lazy. And so the Israelites became angry with Moses and Aaron for making their situation even worse. And Moses began to question God. But God reassured Moses that he would keep his promise to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses told this to the Israelites, but they didn't listen to him. God then sent Moses back to Pharaoh. But Moses started to make more excuses, saying, "Not even the Israelites listen to me, so why would Pharaoh? And I have faltering lips." But God says to Moses, "I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet." So God sent Moses and Aaron back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh demanded a sign from them. So God told Aaron to throw his staff on the floor, and when Aaron did this, the staff turned into a snake. But Pharaoh brought in his magicians, and they caused their own staffs to become snakes as well. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. And the text says that Pharaoh's heart became hard, and he would not listen to them.
Journey back. So, unmute everybody. And the first women that I'd like to talk about are Shifra and Pua. And here you can see what their names look like in the Hebrew text. But there is some debate whether or not these are actually Hebrew names or they were Egyptian names and just transliterated by the Hebrews. Same as Moses. So Moses is an Egyptian name, but there are Jewish men who have the name Moses, but it is Moshe or Moshe, a Hebrew-wized version of it, but it's an Egyptian name. So in Exodus 1:15 through 21, we have this brief story of Shifra and Pua, but one of the surprising things is they are actually named in the text. Would anybody be willing to read this? You can just read what's on the screen.
Sure. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, oh wait, your pictures are in the way.
There we go.
The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, she shall live. But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and allowed the boys to live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families.
Basically, they're saying these women are not like us. They're super women. They're likely the midwives are there when they're having the babies, but this was a good enough story, and Pharaoh's a man and doesn't want anything to do with it, so he doesn't know. And he falls for it. The midrash on these women, and that text that you just read, Denise, is the only text about these midwives. There are references to them in the Psalms, but this is it for the record, and the only place they are named. So there's lots of midrash written about it. The less text there is in Scripture, in the Torah, the more midrash the rabbis are going to write about it. So here's the midrash. The Torah tells us in verse 17 of Exodus 1 that the midwives did not heed Pharaoh and did not do as the king of Egypt had spoken to them. They let the boys live. Rabbis ask why it was necessary to write, they let the boys live, if Scripture already stated that the midwives did not do the king of Egypt's bidding. They answer, this is the rabbis, that the end of the verse teaches that not only did they not kill the boys, they actively aided them to live by giving them food and water, so that this generation of men is going to be a lot stronger and healthier. The Midrash explains that if the midwives saw poor women, they would go and collect food and water from the houses of wealthy women, which they gave to the poor ones, thus enabling them to provide for their children. So allowing them to fully live. Another midrash relates that the midwives knew that fetuses are liable to be harmed during the course of the delivery and be born with some physical defect. They therefore stood and prayed, Master of the universe, you know that we did not fulfill Pharaoh's edict, but we seek to fulfill your word. Master of the worlds, may the children emerge unscathed so that the Israelites will not find a reason to speak against us, saying that we wanted to kill them, and they were born with defects. God immediately accepted the prayer of the midwives, and all the children were born without flaw. According to an additional tradition, in order to avoid such mishaps during the course of the delivery, the midwives prayed to God, saying, Master of the worlds, punish them for their sins now, example, in some way other than by death, and give them life. So it will be said that we killed them by order of Pharaoh. Will not be said that we killed them by order of Pharaoh. God did as they requested and let both the mother and the children live. So that's basically saying during this time, there was no eclampsia. The women did not die. None of the children died that were born, especially the male children. So Pharaoh wanted to kill them, and there was a population boom. Then we have Yocheved. and you'll notice the two different spellings in a lot of commentary text. Yocheved is spelled with a J because it's by German theologians. And in German, J is a Y sound. In others, you'll see a Y. Those are usually English theologians. And this is more like the Hebrew, because there is no J in Hebrew. It's always a Ya. It's a Yud or a Ya sound. So Yocheved, wife of Amram and mother of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, is mentioned by name only in Exodus 6:20 and Numbers 26:59, both genealogical listings. So the narrative in Exodus 2 about Moses does not provide their names, her name, or Miriam's name. As a member of the though we know that she is a member of the priestly tribe of Levi, she marries a Levitical man, also unnamed here, but later in scripture we know him as Amram. The mother, in defiance of Pharaoh's order that every male Hebrew child be killed, hides her newborn son for 3 months and then places him in a basket in the Nile. Now, there's the order that's given to the midwives that they should just kill the newborn male children. And obviously that doesn't work, and Pharaoh finally figures out that it doesn't work. So he sends his soldiers, and the babies are taken from their mothers and thrown into the Nile River to be eaten by the alligators. This is going to mirror later in the New Testament the slaughter of the innocents in Bethlehem, because Pharaoh's order is all children up to 2 years old. So Pharaoh's daughter, also unnamed, finds the child that has been placed in a basket and floating on the river, and accepts the offer of Moses' sister, Miriam, who has followed the basket, to rescue her brother, to find a Hebrew woman as a wet nurse for the infant. The narrative clearly places Yocheved as the caregiver for her own son. And it gives us the months too. So we know that for the next 3 years, Moses lives with his own birth family. He doesn't live in the palace. And this is very much like this story with Joseph, that the Hebrews are brought into Egypt, the Egyptians are enslaved, and Pharaoh pays the Hebrews to raise his sheep. Well, here, Moses has been saved by the daughter of Pharaoh, and Miriam has found this wet nurse, his own mother, to take care of the child until he is weaned, and pays her. So she's not treated as a slave here. She is actually taken care of. She's given food. She's given money, and actually lives quite well for those 3 years that she's raising her own son. The Midrash portrays Yocheved as a wise woman who was righteous and God-fearing. By merit of her good deeds, she gave birth to the 3 leaders of the Exodus generation, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. A number of miracles were performed for Yocheved in connection with the birth of Moses. She bore him at the age of 130, according to the Midrash, and God restored her youth and her beauty. Yocheved enjoyed longevity, living to witness the positions of leadership held by her children. That was even one of the Israelites who entered the land of Canaan. Again, none of that is in scripture, only in the commentary of the rabbis and in the Midrash that's passed down from generation to generation. So they're always listed as Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, and that's just because how English for many centuries dictated how names were listed out. So you have the most famous, the male Moses, and then his brother Aaron and Miriam. Really, Miriam is the eldest, and then Aaron is the middle child, and Moses is the youngest. And we can take from scripture and from this story from the Midrash that Miriam and Aaron are a lot older than Moses is. I don't have it written out here, but there are some midrash that says that when the edict went out that all the children were to be killed in order to protect their wives, so it says, Amram and many of the Levitical men of Israel divorced their wives.
Hmm.
So she has Miriam and Aaron, and it said that she was 3 months pregnant when they got divorced, when he ordered the divorce. And then God speaks to him and says, this is stupid, basically. You don't need to divorce her. So they remarry just before Moses is born. But placing that much later in life. In addition to her given name, the Torah also designates Yocheved as the daughter of Levi. Now, Levi is one of Jacob's sons. The name of Amram's wife was Yocheved, daughter of Levi. So Yocheved Beth Levi, and who was born to Levi in Egypt. So it is in the book of Numbers, it is very specifically saying Yocheved, the mother of Moses, is Jacob's granddaughter. Now, a lot of the midrash is going to tell us that they were enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. Well, that doesn't necessarily work out if Yocheved is Levi's daughter. The midrash adds that she was conceived on the way to Egypt and was born between the walls, meaning at the entrance to Egypt. Although the Torah asserts that Jacob's household who came to Egypt numbered 70 souls, the rabbis noted that only 69 individuals are listed in Genesis 46, which is when they come into Egypt. One of the explanations is that Yocheved is in her mother's womb and born once they get to Egypt. So technically, when they crossed the threshold, when they crossed the border into Egypt, there's only 69 of them, but there were 70 the next day. Because that's how birth works. There's also a theory that Shifra is the Egyptian name of Yocheved. The rabbis identify Yocheved with Shifra, one of the two of the Hebrew midwives, Shifra and Puah, who delivered the children of the Israelites during the Egyptian servitude. The Torah relates that the midwives did not fulfill Pharaoh's command because they feared God, who rewarded them for their ancestors' actions. He established households, or batim, for them, which the rabbis understand as priestly and Levitical households, or as royal households. So Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Aaron attaining the high priesthood, Moses being the great prophet, and we'll see later Miriam herself being a named prophet. So the theory is that Shifra and Puah are actually Yocheved and her daughter Miriam, or Yocheved and Elisheba, who is Aaron's wife. They said Miriam and Aaron are much older than Moses. So that is one theory. This is something that Cecil B. DeMille runs with in a little way in the movie The Ten Commandments, if you've ever seen it. If not, I highly recommend you go and find it this afternoon. It will clear a few hours out of your day. But in the Exodus scene, Miriam is portrayed as a midwife. And she's in one of these tents, and a baby is born between the walls going out of Egypt. So Cecil B. DeMille did his research and study of Midrash, and is building this story from that. I'm more inclined to think that Shifra and Puah are actually their own characters, and that Yocheved and Miriam and Elisheba are their own characters, and they don't overlap. Yocheved is also mentioned in Islam. Moses is one of the characters of the Quran. Remember that the Holy Quran is written from Allah's perspective, God's perspective, and transcribed by the Prophet Muhammad. So in in Quran 28:7-13, it says this: we inspired Moses, or Musa, mother, saying, suckle him, and then when you fear for his safety, put him in the river. Do not be afraid and do not grieve, for we shall return him to you and make him a messenger. Pharaoh's household picked him up later to become an enemy and a source of grief for them. Pharaoh, Haman, and their armies were wrongdoers. And Pharaoh's wife said, here is a joy to behold for me and for you. Do not kill him. He may be of use to us, or we may adopt him as a son. See, somebody else is trying to get in.
I think Cynthia is.
Cynthia. Let's see, unmute audio. Hello, Cynthia.
Hi there, finally.
Cynthia, I'm gonna mute you again because we can hear Frank's TV.
Okay.
So we are currently on Yocheved, who is the mother of Moses and where she appears in the Quran. Soon after, Moses' mother felt a void in her heart after putting him into the Nile. If we had not strengthened it to make her one of those who believe, she would have revealed her everything about him. And she said to his sister, follow him. So she watched him from a distance without them knowing. We had ordained that he would refuse to feed from wet nurses in the palace. His sister approached them and said, shall I tell you about a household which could bring him up for you and take good care of him? We restored him to his mother in this way so that she might be comforted, not grieve, and know that God's promise is true, though most of them do not know. And in the Quran, she is named as Yocheved, which is the Arabic version of Yocheved. And then Moses is Musa. And this is from Persia or India, probably near Afghanistan. And it is a depiction of Asiya, who we'll see is Pharaoh's daughter or Pharaoh's wife in some stories, with the long black tresses, and her servants, having finished bathing, find Moses or Musa in the Nile. And this is the text of the Quran telling this story. So let's take a look at this daughter of Pharaoh. The daughter of Pharaoh did not follow her father's wicked ways, but rather converted and ceased worshiping idols. She was highly praised by the rabbis, and the Midrash includes her among the devout women converts. Hagar, Sinath, Zipporah, Shifra, Puah, the daughter of Pharaoh, Rabbah, Ruth, and Jael, the wife of Heber of Kenit, who we'll see at a later study. The Midrash specifically praised the daughter of Pharaoh for her rescue of Moses, thereby aiding in the exodus of all the Israelites from Egypt. So saying she plays a big part in softening Pharaoh's heart. Moses was raised in her home by a woman who believed in God. She radiated warmth and loved him as if he were her own son, and accordingly was richly rewarded. The Midrash says that she married Caleb. This is Joshua and Caleb from the Exodus story, the son of Jephunneh. I'd completely botched that, but we'll go with it. and joined the people of Israel, meaning she converted and became a daughter of Judah. The daughter of Pharaoh as Bithiah. This is one of the names, and if you know Cecil B. DeMille's famous movie, the daughter of Pharaoh is Bithiah. The Midrash calls the daughter of Pharaoh Bithiah, identifying her with the woman mentioned in 1 Chronicles 4:18. So a lot of the story of the women in Exodus is talked about the rest of the Jewish history in the Chronicles, in Numbers, and the Psalms, and we're pulling it all back together. So 1 Chronicles 4:18 states, "And his Judahite wife bore Jared, father of Gedor, Heber, father of Soko, and Jekuthiel, father of Zanoah. These were the sons of Bithiah, daughter of Pharaoh, whom Mered married." This Bithiah, daughter of Pharaoh, mentioned in this verse, is one of the two wives of Mered, who was descended from Caleb, son of Hezron, who apparently was a Judahite extraction. So he's from the tribe of Judah. The rabbis found the name Bat Yah to be fitting for the daughter of Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, since she unwittingly realized the divine plan when she kept alive the rescuer of Israel. The Midrash relates that the daughter of Pharaoh received her new name of Bithiah, or Batya, literally meaning the daughter of God, from God as reward for her actions. God told her, "Moses was not your son, yet you called him your son. You are not my daughter, yet I will call you Beti, my daughter." The verse in Chronicles served as the basis of various expositions concerning the daughter of Pharaoh. The rabbis asked why Chronicles refers to her as his Judahite or Jewish wife, since she was an Egyptian. They answer that Bithiah received this appellation because she repudiated idolatry. She gives up worshiping idols and converts. Now, in the book of Exodus, the Hebrew says Bat Pharaoh, daughter of Pharaoh. So the rabbis are saying her name was just changed to Bat Pharaoh to Batiyah. This is not unusual in scripture to be given as the name being a descriptive name like that. Batiyah, daughter of God. Bat Pharaoh, daughter of Pharaoh. We get this in the stories in Chronicles and Kings. Bathsheba, David and Bathsheba. Bathsheba is not her name, it's actually descriptive. She is daughter Sheba, the daughter of Sheba. And I'll save more on that until later Sunday school, because she's worth getting her own story, trust me. Bithiah appears more in the Midrash and in the Torah account of what happened after the ark was drawn forth in Exodus 2:6. When she opened it, she saw that this is the Hebrew transliteration, Vatirehu, was a child, and a child. She took pity on it. The rabbis ask what caused the daughter of Pharaoh to take pity on Moses and keep him alive. He's very obviously a Hebrew child. He is circumcised. There's no way around it. You know what's going on. And the story says that that the child cries, and Bithiah then takes pity on him for crying when he cries. But it says that the beginning of the verse, that he doesn't cry at first, and God sends the angel Gabriel down to the river to slap the baby Moses, and that makes the baby cry. Literally what the rabbis have said the story, how the story goes. In the beginning of the verse refers to Moses as a child, a yeled, and then calls him a boy, a na'ar. Both of these words are used. A yeled is an infant, and an na'ar is a child, is a boy, older. From which the rabbis learn, because of these two words being used, that Moses was a Yeled, that is, an infant, but he conducted himself as a Na'ar, as an older child. Thus, when the daughter of Pharaoh opened the ark, Moses, unlike other babies, did not cry. So the angel Gabriel immediately came and hit Moses so that he would cry, therefore arousing the compassion of the daughter of Pharaoh. Another tradition claims that the daughter of Pharaoh suffered from leprosy, and when she went down to bathe in the waters to be cured of the disease, when she touched the ark of Moses, the basket, she was miraculously healed. There's another story from his childhood in the Midrash that says that when Moses was 12 years old, he did not conduct himself as a Na'ar, but conducted himself as a man. So he is, from birth, he is great. This is where the legend comes in. The story is that when he's 12 years old, he is found in the library in Pharaoh's palace, teaching all the great scholars. Does this story sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yes,
Jesus.
that is Jesus. So the Jewish audience hearing the gospel stories, when you get the story of, and Jesus at 12 years old went with his family at Passover, and they accidentally left him in Jerusalem. And 3 days later, he's found in the temple, expounding on the scriptures and teaching the great teachers. Same thing with Moses. So the Jewish audience is going to immediately compare this young Jesus with Moses, this deliverer and this new deliverer. So we get away from spanking babies now. Now, Bithia, or Pharaoh's daughter, is also found in the Quran. Here's another Persian image. And in the Quran, she is known as Asiya in Arabic, Asiya bint Muzahim. And this name is also reminiscent of that Batya, this daughter of God. Asiya and her maids were at the neighboring Nile River one day. To their amazement, they found a crate, an ark, or a basket, floating in the river. Asiya immediately ordered that the crate be brought out on shore. The maids thought there was a treasure in the crate, but instead found a baby, Musa. Asiya instantly felt motherly love toward him. She told Pharaoh that about the baby, and the incident has been described in the Quran. In verse 9:5, and Pharaoh's wife said, "A refreshment of the eye to me and to thee. Slay him not. Maybe he will be useful for us, or we will take him as our son." And they perceived not. So Asiya then offered Moses' mother to live in their household as his wet nurse and paid her for her services, unaware of their relationship. It's the same story in Exodus. When she witnessed the death of a believing woman under her husband's torture, she declared, this is Asiya being tortured because she has converted. She declared her faith before Pharaoh, who tried to turn her away from her faith. But Asiya refused to reject the God and the teachings of Moses. On Pharaoh's order, she was tortured to death. So in the Hebrew scripture, she is taken in by the Israelites and leaves Egypt in the Exodus and enters the Promised Land. In the Islamic story, she converts, trusting in God, in Allah, and for that she is tortured to death by her husband. In the Quran, she is Pharaoh's wife, not Pharaoh's daughter. Of course, in the way that the monarchy worked in Egypt, she very well could have been his sister, daughter, wife, all at the same time. So,
Yeah.
I am my uncle's grandpa. Yeah. Asiya, who drew Musa from the Nile, is among the 4 noble women of heaven, and there are only 4. Along with Mary, the mother of Isa, this is Mary, the mother of Jesus, Khadijah, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, and Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. Then we get this very interesting character who appears in Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. And I never thought too much about it. And then I started researching for this and found that there's actually evidence in a story that DeMille was taking from Josephus and from Irenaeus and from the Midrash. And that is the story of Tharbis. Tharbis is a historical person. We have her dates. We know who she is. She was a princess of the Kushite kingdom. And here you see this map. Here is Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Israel is up here, Ethiopia, Sudan, Kenya, Somalia, and that is the region of Kush. They are the enemies to the south of Egypt. We have her dates, 1585 BCE to 1485 BCE. A Kushite princess of Ethiopia, Tharbis, alternatively Adoniah in Hebrew, meaning daughter of the Lord, basically, married the Hebrew Moses prior to his ascendancy to prophethood, and better be known marriage to Zipporah. So this is during those 40 years that he is prince of Egypt. Tharbis is alleged to have been the daughter of King Merops, who is a historical figure, and there is stone writings about him. According to the historian Josephus, which is about the time of Jesus, in Moses' early adult life, he had led the Egyptians in a campaign against invading Ethiopians and defeated them. While Moses was besieging the city of Meru, Tharbis watched him lead the Egyptian army from within the city walls and fell in love with him. You know, he's invading your palace, but he's a looker. He agreed to marry her if she would procure the deliverance of the city into his power, which she did so immediately. And Moses promptly married her. This account of the expedition is also mentioned by Saint Irenaeus. So this is a story that is believed by the early church. After the war, when Moses sought to return to Egypt, Tharbis is said to have resisted and insisted that he remain in Ethiopia as her husband. He then, being most skillful in astronomy, cast 2 rings. This is very Tolkien at the moment. One which caused the wearer to become forgetful, and the other caused the wearer to remember all. He gave the first ring, the forgetful one, to Tharbis, and wore the second one himself, and waited for her oblivious nature to lose interest in retaining him as a husband. So just forget that he existed. And when she had forgotten her love for him, he returned to Egypt alone. Some have suggested that this period may have started when Moses was 27, and that he remained with Tharbis for those 40 years, although the number contradicts the traditional sources, which suggest that Moses killed an Egyptian overseer when he was approximately 40 years old himself. Again, legend conflates. Some have suggested that her story is an invention arising from the idiomatic verse in the book of Numbers that states, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of his Cushite wife, whom he had married. Miriam is punished for her rebuke of her brother by being afflicted with leprosy. It is also suggested that Artapanus of Alexandria may have concocted this entire story to impress his pagan audience with such a love story. So basically, it's good theater, is one theory. I don't know, I kind of like to believe that Tharbis was really Moses' wife before he realizes who he is. So then we have the story of Miriam, Moses' sister. Whoops. Oh, come on. I'm having a time with this. She helps deliver Moses from the river Nile. Many commentators identify her as Miriam, although that name just appears in the 2 genealogies later, along with her mother. She is called the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister. She leads Hebrew women in singing, dancing, and playing drums. She is the first woman to officially bear this title of prophet in Scripture. And I will just point out that Hebrew has does not have a neuter. There are two genders in the Hebrew language, masculine and feminine. And prophet is masculine. So even though Miriam is a woman, she is given this masculine title. Miriam with Aaron, who challenges the prophetic authority of Moses, she asks, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken also through us? So there's a bit of sibling rivalry. This is when she is struck with leprosy by God. And some say she is healed. Others say that she is, and the scripture says that she is sent out of the camp for a period of time. She is put under quarantine. And then returns. After her punishment, she never speaks again, nor is she spoken to. Indeed, she disappears altogether from the narrative until the announcement of her death and burial at Kadesh. In the New Testament, Miriam's afterlife continues through her name and her deeds. The Greek name Mary is the equivalent of the Hebrew Miriam. And in singing a song of deliverance, which Miriam does, and Mary does, and embodying a demonic or diseased condition, Luke 8:2, another Mary, and in challenging male authorities, Matthew 28:10, Luke 24:10, John 20:11-18, the various Marys of the gospel reflect their namesake. Names are important. Why are you doing this to me? There we go. Nature also honors Miriam. She is the one that passed through the living waters of the Red Sea. They surrounded her as she walked through. At her demise, at her death, the wells of the desert dry up, according to Numbers 22. Centuries later, prophecy remembers her as the equal of Moses and Aaron in representing God before the people. It's said that Moses speaks to the men and Miriam speaks to the women. The prophet Jeremiah recalls her in his prophecy in Jeremiah 31:4, talking about the drums and dancing and merrymakers. She is the inaugurator of a performance and composition tradition of song, drums, and dances in Israel. If you joined us for morning prayer this morning, our canticle was the Song of Moses. It's been told to us. It's more likely it's an older source and was the Song of Miriam, and there was a few things added, and then the rabbis were like, oh, this is by Moses. It's by Miriam. In the New Testament, just read that one. Finally, we have Zipporah. Zipporah is known as the wife of Moses. She's the Midianite woman. After Moses kills an Egyptian, he flees Pharaoh and goes out into the wilderness and finds himself in Midian. Midian is modern-day Saudi Arabia. They are the descendants of Ishmael. Again, the families are intermarrying. Her father is Jethro, and in thanks to Moses for defending his flocks and defending the well, Jethro, or Reuel, which is one of his other names, gives his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. She and Moses have two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Zipporah is the heroine of a bizarre incident, as we saw in the video earlier, so I won't rehash it. But this is the story of the foreskin, where the angel is trying to kill either Moses or his two sons. So Zipporah takes a flint knife and circumcises her sons and throws them at Moses' feet in one translation of it. And this is Exodus 4:26, since my mother wanted to know if that was real. Yes, Exodus 4:26. One says that she threw it at Moses' feet. Another says that she flung it at God's feet. We don't really know why this story is there, what it means. Even the rabbis are like, I don't get it. Let's just move on. The rabbis ascribed many traits to Zipporah, whom they considered to be differing from other women in a positive sense in both appearance and deed. Notice all these men of the Old Testament have very, very beautiful wives. A beautiful woman, she had received a special blessing that her comeliness would last her into her old age, and she is also described as a practical woman capable of taking action at the right moment. She fights with Moses by his side. I'm sure she fought with him too. She was his wife. Of course they fought. She ran to bring him back from the well and hence became his wife. There's this well narrative again. Moses meets his wife at a well. As I said last week, the wells in the scripture are biblical eHarmony. The rabbis, they also explained that Moses never wanted to part from Zipporah and sent her to her father's house in Midian only for fear that Egyptian servitude would harm her. After the giving of the Torah, a life of sexual abstinence was imposed on Moses due to his spiritual standing, because he was every day going in before God. So he had to retain purity. Then this Zipporah found very difficult, so it said that she goes and lives in her father's tent for the rest of her life after Jethro comes and helps Moses set up the circuit court system.
But he was already over 8 years old.
Yeah.
He was 8 years old when he met her, wasn't he?
But we don't know how old she was. So, are there any questions? That was a lot of information, I realize.
I'll go back and listen to the beginning.
It'll start to slow down a little bit, but I think with Moses, there are all these women. Really, he needed the help. Even when he goes back to speak to Pharaoh, he's appealing to God, right? Like, oh, I can't go back. They're going to kill me. Don't worry. I'll be with you. I'll keep you safe. Oh, I'm really bad at talking. Well, I'll send Aaron with you. And I have a feeling that, yeah, Aaron goes to speak to Pharaoh, and then there's the unwritten part, right? I have a feeling that Miriam did all the talking with Israel, with the people of Israel.
Well, the story never says that either one of them say anything. So it's like he just needed a security blanket almost. He just needed someone next to him so that when he talked, he had, that comfort or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're right, Miriam was the leader in a lot of ways, so she may have done the talking.
Yeah, Moses he needed a lot of help. He doesn't really find his confidence until after the Exodus.
Father Joshua?
Yeah.
When you talk about the writers of the Torah and, they needed, an angel had to come down and slap Moses so he cried. Do the people that wrote at that time just feel a need to have to explain everything? Did they have to? I'm not sure what I mean. It seems to be, do they make things up to fit something that was said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when your job during the week is to sit and study Torah, for this practice really starts during the Babylonian exile, because there's no temple anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So your sacrifice is to study Torah. So they just sit around at night and are like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Well, this must be why.
Okay.
There are people that do that nowadays with words. They'll say, oh, this word is the same root as that word, and so therefore it means this or that. And I never see the connections that they come up with. I just think that they just make stuff up.
Okay.
Well, also remember, there are no written. Hebrew is a consonant language. There are no written vowels in Hebrew.
Okay.
We have these symbols that represent the vowels now, but those didn't come into play until the Middle Ages. So for centuries, we're reading the Hebrew text with just the consonants, and you kind of had to, depending on what the vowel you use, you have these 3 consonants, and depending on the vowel, it can mean something completely different.
Okay.
So let's say you have, let's put it in English context. You have H and M. Those are all you're given. What are some words that could be?
HIM, HUM,
HOME.
HOME. Okay.
Right? And him and home are very different.
Right.
But it's the practice of this, that's why they studied it so constantly, and why these stories then get put in. That's why there's so much midrash about these scriptures, because it's like, no, this is actually what it means, and this is how it was passed down to us, because it's coming from an oral tradition.
Okay.
Anything else?
Not from me.
Next week we'll move into the post. I think we'll post Moses era, and I think it's Rahab who we'll get to, who's the prostitute in prostitute heroine in Jericho.
Mhm.
Is there some sentence somewhere in the Bible, what Rahab of the deep? What does Rahab mean?
Rahab of the deep.
Yeah, I thought it was like a sea monster or something. No? Okay.
There is a sea monster in like the Psalms, right?
Yeah.
Not Leviathan. but-
Leviathan. Yeah.
No, it was, I really, Ray something. Yeah, okay. Not important.
Well, do a little research and let me know.
Okay.
It was good to be with you all.
Good to be with you all too.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good week.
Bye.
You too, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.